At last, Smaug the Golden, greatest of the dragons of his day, arose and without warning came against King Thror and descended on the mountain in flames. They delved too greedily and too deep, and disturbed that from which they fled, Durin's Bane. Hey everyone, Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today, I want to bring back an older series, Who Would Win?, where we look at two characters in the Legendarium and see how they would fare against one another. First, I'll give quick summaries of these characters, some of their weaknesses and strengths perhaps through their backstories, and then I will attempt to pin them against each other when they were at their strongest points individually, and then how they would do against one another in more of a military sense rather than individually, where they would be able to call upon allies and servants that would theoretically come to their aid. Today's Who Would Win will be quite strange, as we are going to look at Durin's Bane, the Balrog of Moria, and Smaug the Golden, last of the great dragons in the known world of Middle-earth. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me today. Let's begin our tale. To start, Durin's Bane was perhaps the last Balrog from ancient times to survive into the Second and Third Ages of the world. After fleeing from the War of Wrath, he came to dwell in a cavern beneath the Misty Mountains, beneath the dwarven city of Khazad-dum. Eventually, the dwarves, who wished ever for more mithril, delved too deep and too greedily, unleashing the Balrog upon the waking world. He soon devastated the city of Longbeard so greatly that the survivors went into exile from their home. The Balrog would then dwell in Moria, as Khazad-dum was thereafter called, until the passing of the Fellowship of the Ring through it during the War of the Ring, when he was slain by and slew Gandalf the Grey. Smaug the Golden was a dragon of the north who came down like a terrible hurricane upon the dwarven home of Erebor, the Lonely Mountain, where the Longbeards dwelt after Durin's Bane had exiled them from Khazad-dum. Smaug also destroyed the Manish city of Dale, forcing those surviving men to create Lake Town further down the river Running. The dwarves lost their battle and home to Smaug in 2770 of the Third Age, and Smaug slept upon their gold until at last Thorin's company came, and in a rage Smaug flew to destroy Lake Town, where he was shot down by the archer Bard, who learned from a thrush about a weakness of which the thrush had heard about from Bilbo the burglar, who had seen it. He perished in 2941 of the Third Age. These are the subjects of our conversation today, and to be honest, it will be rather difficult to have a definitive answer for who would win. At large, Balrogs were Maiar, of course, and were thus in existence before dragons were, both as Balrogs and as Ainur before their physical bodies. They usually commanded the armies of Morgoth as Balrogs, and were great combatants in their own right. Dragons were manifested in mockery or were perverted into what they became during the First Age by Morgoth to accomplish rather large-scale destruction on the massive forces of elves, men, and dwarves that Morgoth was up against in the field of battle. And in my opinion, the dragons seemed to carry the malice of Morgoth in them that gave them the ability to function as though they did have free will and or true life. But since I am certain that Morgoth did not have access to the flame imperishable, that which gave free will and true life, dragons did not have such, and were rather the drones of Morgoth's malice, at least in my opinion. Thus we can establish that both Balrogs and dragons are powerful and have differentiated but similar purposes, and Durin's Bane and Smaug were some of, if not the last among them, though likely there were more dragons or drakes in the north of some kind after Smaug. Anyway, with all of this in mind, if we take them individually at their strongest points, likely Durin's Bane after he recovered and rested from the War of Wrath, and was awakened and forced the dwarves from their home, and Smaug when he took Erebor, before he became a rather fat and lazy dragon, and put them against each other, who would win? Well, using the lore as best as I can, we know that Durin's Bane had a more powerful spirit than whatever Smaug had, and it took the life of a great wizard to slay Durin's Bane, whereas it took the well-shot arrow of a man of great lineage to kill Smaug. I must imagine that Durin's Bane would, in single combat, beat Smaug. He is able to use flame and shadow, his sword and whip against Smaug's fire teeth, wings, and claws. Smaug, however, is likely more intelligent than Durin's Bane in some ways, though, and if Smaug could use that to his advantage, that and his potential ability to use a dragon's curse, as it is hinted at in The Hobbit that he has such power, perhaps he could pull off a victory. But a Balrog's victory is assuming that they are in close range, perhaps inside of Erebor or Moria. However, if they were on a vast landscape without a ceiling or roof of some kind, which is where dragons excel, and Smaug could use his wings to fly, and we assume that Balrogs do not have comparable wings. Perhaps Smaug could outmaneuver and defeat Durin's Bane with the perfect strike. Therefore, depending on the context and circumstances of the duel between these two at their strongest points, either could theoretically win the fight, but generally speaking, I do lean more towards Durin's Bane in a one-on-one fight than I do Smaug overall. Since they both have affinities for flame, I do not believe fire would be a great element in bringing either of them down, and it would likely come to their weapons, and the Balrog's sword and whip would likely do more to Smaug than Smaug's claws and teeth could do to him. Again, if we look at them innately and what it took to bring them down in the canon, it just seems like Durin's Bane has the upper hand. Now, how would these creatures do if they could call upon their allies and other forces, even potentially those from other ages? Potentially, Smaug could call upon a great many other dragons, cold and fire alike, and perhaps any forces he might have had by his side in the First Age, if he was indeed that old. However, I don't actually think he was. I think he was a younger dragon that might not have known the First Age. But I think the amount of allies Smaug would have is actually far less than the amount Durin's Bane would have if he called upon his kin, the other Balrogs, and his servants from the First Age. With other Balrogs at his side like Gothmog, perhaps orcs and trolls that he may have led in combat as well, Durin's Bane would likely have a greater force than Smaug indeed. Yet dragons, especially those in the First Age, devastated armies and landscapes in ways that Balrogs simply could not. Yet dragons seemed also to be slain with more ease than were most Balrogs, especially in the canon text. Therefore, I refer back to my previous answer that, even if given a great battlefield, Smaug and his host of dragon allies could likely destroy the battlefield and many of the creatures on it. And if Balrogs took damage from fire, they would all likely be greatly injured by flyovers resulting in a great flame. And even dragons such as Glaurung could implement other strategies and tactics on the battlefield if they were there, such as throwing themselves into water to create a great or deadly mist, or attempting to curse the allies of Durin's Bane with their powers, or Durin's Bane himself, but this is, in my opinion, very charitable to the dragons, and a more realistic take would likely see the Balrogs acting in a deadly harmony of fire and shadow, in a way that could outmaneuver and overpower the dragons, Smaug included, especially in a smaller or more enclosed battle area. And again, we must remember a few key things, especially if there are many Balrogs present. They are Ainur, powerful beings created from the thought of Iluvatar, which helped create the world into being through music. Even if they were Maiar and not Valar, they were still very powerful originally. Powerful enough, in fact, to drive off the great Ungoliant when she scared even Melkor. Innately, this is a far greater power than whatever dragons were before they were dragons. Also within Tolkien's works, we see that, with time, power and magic seem to diminish. So, if dragons came after Balrogs, especially with the idea that Durin's Bane was around far before Smaug was even born, he is likely thematically and practically more powerful. Thus, I imagine that, in a one-on-one duel, Durin's Bane would have a slight or moderate edge over Smaug. But in a full-on great battle, wherein allies of each from even ages past are called upon, I think that Durin's Bane would greatly outmatch Smaug, because he was around in the First Age, and because his allies were very powerful indeed. But these are my conclusions and reasons for them. Let me know what you all think about this in the comments below. I will also link related articles and videos for more information in the description, and cards as well, which helped me come to these conclusions. And so, my friends, we come to the end of our tale. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. Please let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments below. I do not believe there's truly a right or wrong answer here, but it is an interesting matchup nonetheless, if not a difficult one to make, because of the assumptions that we have to make based on the canon. But let me know what you all think. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider getting some candles from our friends Mythologie Candles, or order some Weta or United Cutlery Lord of the Rings swords, statues, and other replicas from Castle Kon, who does international shipping, and use the code WEST at checkout, and please check out our merch and Patreon. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons and YouTube members: Peter Shepard, Jonathan Putin, Mark Kralik, Molly Sullivan, Blair Scouten, Merton, John Hume, Sam McBee, Matt Sabatch, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibbs, Reese Jenkins, Anna Petrlik, Anthony Harmon, Dorian Gray, Arthur Merlin, Dale Davis, Kingswild Project, Robert Bogue, and King of Games 2500. Thank you so much to all of our patrons and YouTube members. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today, and I'll see you all again next week with a video on Haldir. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.